Now that we've defined our electric aircraft panel on the website and we've used the steps outlined in the other videos using Jetty Studio and the dynamic repository loader to bring it down onto our transmitter, let's talk about how we can animate this panel. So let's start by going into Applications, Instrument Panel, Panels, and we'll start with Electric Arc. We'll put the carbon fiber hexagon background on it, and we'll go over to the main screen again, and then we have to do displayed telemetry, clear these out, add instrument panel number 1, and there we are. We've got the basically the background images of the arc gauges and of the horizontal bar, but they're not connected yet with sensors. So let's go ahead and start by going into the app and, going into the app, and we'll go into the inputs. Okay, so we'll start with volts. Well, it'll be a sensor. So let's go down, and we've created a sensor for motor volts. Let's go down to amps, and we've created a sensor with the sensor emulator for motor current. And then let's go back and see what that looks like. So now what I've also done in the sensor emulator is I've rigged up the throttle switch, slider number 4, so that it creates a sweep through the volts and the amps, something like what an actual electric motor would do. So as I slide the throttle up, I get the volts maxing out at 30 and the amps maxing out at 100. And you can see those nice rainbows that we specified on the website coming to life. So that's the volts and the amps. Let's go tackle the capacity. So inputs, capacity milliamp hours, that will also be a sensor. And I've rigged up this emulation of the central box capacity with as if it were a 5,000 milliamp hour capacity. And we go back and I put that on slider 5, and you can see that that goes, as I slide this up and down, from 0 to 5,000. And as you guys know, the Jetty sensors, when the battery is fully charged, they're at 0 milliamp hours, and then as the battery charges, the capacity that it's reporting is the capacity that's been used. Okay, so we've now got our volts, our amps, and our capacity connected. Now what are we going to do about power? Well, what we need to do about power is we need to create variables that we can use in Lua. And so we're going to go create some variables. And so if we go over to our applications and our Lua variables, we don't have any Lua variables defined. So let's create 2, and let's leave this at the default name of S1. And we'll come down here and we'll set this to be the variable for motor voltage. And then we'll go down here to sensor 2, and we'll set that to be the motor current. And this would be coming from an MUI sensor or some other sensor that we would use with our Jetty system. And so we now have 2 Lua variables, S1 and S2, whose value is tracked with the sensors for motor voltage and motor current. So then we can go back up to inputs, and we can say, all right, for our arc gauge for power in watts, we want that to be the voltage times the current. And so instead of a sensor, we're going to set that to be Lua. We're going to edit our Lua, and we see S1 and S2 are available to us here. So we enter S1, and then we come over to the times, and we enter times, and then we come to S2, and we enter that, and you can see here it's previewing the value for us is 841. So if we back up to the top here and take a look at our screen, you'll now see that the power is the product of the 2. So 3,000 watts at 30 volts and 30 amps. And if you go through and check these, you'll find that this tracks all the way along. Okay, so that's how we've connected 2 sensors to the volts and the amps gauges, and we've used our Lua capability by setting Lua variables equal to the sensor values and then building a Lua expression, just a simple product of the voltage times the current to get watts. Now suppose we wanted to have our battery capacity, instead of reading up as the battery goes down, 0 at full and 5,000 at empty, suppose we wanted it to read the other way. All right, so let's go back to our application, and let's go to Lua variables, and let's create a third Lua variable because we want to work with the capacity. So let's go down and create a variable S3 for the central box capacity 1. And then what we can do is we can go back to inputs, and on the capacity, instead of reading capacity 1 right directly off the sensor, we can say we're going to put in a Lua expression, and we put in the Lua expression here of circle around to 5,000 minus S3. Okay, so 5,000 is the capacity of the battery. S3 counts up by the Jetty convention. We'd prefer to read the gauge the other way, so we'll do 5,000 minus S3. And then if we go back to the top here, you can see that when it's reporting 0 milliamps capacity on the Jetty, that's going to report to us here on the screen that we have 5,000 milliamps of capacity left. And then as the battery gets used up, you'll see that it goes down and proceeds through the rainbow on that capacity gauge. So just a quick example of two very simple ways